My brother-in-law just told my wife he is in love with her. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Ethan. I'm 35 years old, married to my wife Megan, who is 33. We've been together for 7 years, building what I thought was a strong marriage. We've had ups and downs, like any couple, but we always came out stronger. Lately, we had been talking about starting a family, something that filled me with excitement and nervousness at the same time. I loved her deeply, trusted her completely, and believed she felt the same. Megan's younger brother, Kyle, was a regular presence in our lives. He was 30, lived nearby, and often came over for dinners or just to hang out. At first, I didn't mind. Family is important, and I wanted Megan to feel close to her brother. He'd sit with us, joke around, sometimes help with little projects in the house. I thought he was just being a good brother. But something happened one night that broke the ground under my feet. It was late, and I had just come back from finishing some work in my office upstairs. As I walked toward the kitchen, I heard voices. Megan and Kyle were sitting at the table, speaking in low tone. I almost walked away, but then Kyle's words froze me where I stood. "I can't hold it in anymore," he said. "I've always been in love with you. I can't stand seeing you with Ethan." At first, I thought I misheard. My mind went blank, and I felt my heart slam in my chest. I stayed quiet, hidden in the hallway, not believing what I was hearing. My wife's own brother, the man we welcomed into our home again and again, was confessing his love for her. It felt like some twisted nightmare, the kind you wake up from drenched in sweat. I strained to hear Megan's response, hoping she would shut him down immediately, laugh it off, tell him how wrong and disgusting it was. Instead, there was silence. A long, awful silence that made my stomach twist. Finally, she whispered something I couldn't catch. Whatever it wasn't the strong rejection I was waiting for. My hands were shaking, and my throat felt dry. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head. Did she know? Had she encouraged this? Was there something going on behind my back? I wanted to burst into the kitchen, to demand answers, to scream at both of them for betraying me in the worst way possible. But I couldn't move. I stood there, frozen, feeling like the world I built was collapsing. The woman I loved, the woman I planned to raise children with, was sitting in my kitchen while her own brother confessed he was in love with her. I had never felt so sick, so betrayed, so utterly destroyed. My marriage, my trust, even my sense of reality, all of it cracked in that moment. I eventually backed away quietly, afraid of what I might say if I entered that room. My chest was tight, and my legs felt heavy as I climbed the stairs. Lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I kept replaying his words. "I've always been in love with you. I can't stand seeing you with Ethan." Everything changed in that instant. The man I thought of as family was now my enemy, and the woman I loved more than anything suddenly felt like a stranger. I didn't know what to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure: life would never be the same again. I waited until morning to face her. The entire night I had stared at the ceiling, my chest tight, listening to her steady breathing beside me. When the sun finally lit the room, I turned to Megan and asked straight out about what I heard. My voice shook more than I wanted it to. She froze for a second, then tried to act calm. She said Kyle had crossed a line, and she had told him it was wrong. She swore nothing had ever happened, that she would never betray me. Her words were steady, but her eyes weren't. They darted away from mine, and her hands twisted in her lap. It wasn't the response of someone who felt completely innocent. I kept pressing. She repeated that she had shut him down, that he was confused, that it wasn't her fault. Still, the pauses between her words made me uneasy. Her mouth said no, but her face carried something else, guilt or fear, or maybe both. I couldn't tell if she was hiding something, or if I was just too raw to believe her. That night I lay awake again, the sound of her breathing no longer comforting but unbearable. Every time she shifted beside me, I felt myself stiffen. My head spun with questions I couldn't silence. Had she ever looked at him the way she looked at me? Had there been more conversations I hadn't overheard? I wanted to trust her, but the seed of doubt was growing fast. Days later, Kyle began acting differently. He stopped dropping by like he used to. When he did show up, his eyes wouldn't meet mine. He kept his distance, almost like he was afraid to be near me. His laugh, once easy, now came out forced and nervous. Every move he made screamed guilt. It was impossible not to notice. The shift in Megan, the change in Kyle, together they gnawed at me. My home no longer felt safe. Every room carried an echo of that night, and every glance between them tightened the knot in my stomach. Trust had been cracked, and no matter how much I wanted to believe her words, my instincts wouldn't let me rest. Megan began acting sweeter than usual. She lingered close to me, laughed at things that weren't funny, kissed me more often, as if trying to erase something invisible between us. On the surface, it might have looked like affection, but to me it felt forced. Every smile seemed rehearsed. every touch just a little too deliberate. One night, I woke to the faint glow of her phone. She was curled on her side, thumb moving quickly across the screen. The clock read past midnight. I lay still, watching her for a moment, then asked who she was talking to. She jumped like a kid caught sneaking cookies. Her reply was quick, just family stuff, nothing important. I asked which family. She frowned and rolled her eyes, said I was being ridiculous, said brothers and sisters sometimes text late. She stuffed her phone under her pillow and turned her back. My chest burned with anger, but I said nothing. I lay awake again, listening to the silence stretch wider between us. The next day I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was family talk. Maybe she was right. But then I remembered the way her shoulders tightened when I asked, the way she snapped instead of simply showing me the screen. If she had nothing to hide, why act like that? My mind circled the question until it felt like I was going insane. At work, I found myself distracted. Every buzz of my own phone made me wonder what messages she was sending when I wasn't around. I hated feeling suspicious, but I couldn't shake it. The woman who once felt like my safe place now seemed like a puzzle full of missing pieces. I finally broke down and called my best friend Mark. We'd known each other since high school. He had been there through college parties, my wedding, every major chapter of my life. If there was one person I could be honest with, it was him. We met for beers after work. I told him everything, what I overheard, the late-night texting, Megan's odd behavior. Mark listened quietly, brow furrowed, letting me pour it all out. When I finished, I expected him to be outraged, to confirm my worst fears. Instead, he leaned back and said, "You've got to keep your cool. Don't accuse her of things without proof. Just watch. Pay attention. The truth always shows itself." His words didn't give me peace, but they gave me direction. I couldn't stop the storm in my chest, but maybe I could control how I handled it. For now, I would wait, observe, and gather the truth piece by piece. Still, walking back into my house that night, hearing Megan humming in the kitchen, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Her voice, once comforting, now carried sharp edges I couldn't ignore. Was I losing my mind, or was she carefully hiding something in plain sight? That question followed me like a shadow, refusing to let me rest. I came home earlier than usual one evening. The house was quiet except for the low hum of voices drifting from the kitchen. I slowed my steps, not meaning to sneak, but something about the tone of the conversation made me hesitate. Megan and Kyle sat close at the table, their heads tilted toward each other. The air between them was charged, not the kind of casual sibling talk I'd expect. Their voices were hushed, almost secretive, and the way their eyes locked on each other made my stomach turn. She leaned in when he spoke, smiling softly, her hand brushing the rim of her glass like she was nervous. I stepped fully into the doorway, and both of them jumped back as if caught. Kyle's face went pale. He mumbled something about needing to go, and practically bolted from his chair. He didn't even look at me as he rushed past, grabbing his jacket and muttering an excuse that didn't make sense. The door slammed behind him, leaving me standing there, staring at Megan. She crossed her arms, acting annoyed. "You're making something out of nothing," she said, her tone sharp. She insisted they were just talking, that siblings could share personal conversations without it being weird. When I pointed out the way they looked at each other, the whispering, the way Kyle ran like a guilty man, she rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting," she snapped. But I knew what I saw. That wasn't the warmth of family. It was something else entirely. I studied her face while she scolded me, and beneath the irritation I caught a flicker of something she didn't mean to show. A slight curve of her lips when she mentioned Kyle's name, the kind of unconscious reaction a person has when they like the attention. My chest tightened. Up until then, part of me still wanted to believe she had nothing to do with his feeling, that she was caught in the middle of something she didn't ask for. But standing there, looking at her flushed cheeks and defensive stance, I realized she wasn't as innocent as she wanted me to believe. Maybe she hadn't crossed a physical line, but she wasn't pushing him away either. That thought lit a fire inside me. I felt heat rise in my neck, not just hurt but anger. The picture became clearer. She might enjoy the way he looked at her, the way he worshipped her, even if she denied it out loud. And every second she let it continue was a betrayal. I clenched my fists, forcing myself not to yell. She turned back to the sink, pretending the conversation was over, but for me it was just beginning. The doubt that had been gnawing at me shifted into something darker. I couldn't brush it aside anymore. This wasn't paranoia, it was real. And now, instead of confusion, I felt a steady burn of rage. I was sorting through the mail one afternoon when a folded slip caught my eye. It wasn't mine, but it had Megan's name on it. I almost set it aside, but curiosity made me open it. It was a receipt from a restaurant across town, dated on a night she'd sworn she had to stay late at the office. I froze. The charge wasn't small, and the receipt clearly listed 2 entrees, wine, and dessert. My chest tightened as I thought back to that evening. I remembered her walking in close to midnight, exhausted look on her face, mumbling about back-to-back meeting. But here was proof she hadn't been at work at all. I told myself it could have been with coworkers. I wanted to believe that. But then I found another one, tucked inside her purse when she left it on the couch. Same story. A different restaurant. Another evening she had claimed she was swamped with deadline. The pattern was too precise, too clean to ignore. It didn't take long before I realized who she had been meeting. There was only one person that made sense. Kyle. The pieces fell together with a cruel click. The strange closeness, the whispering in the kitchen, the late-night messages. Now there was evidence in my hands, hard proof she had lied straight to my face. I sat alone at the table with the slips spread out in front of me. My hands trembled as I stared at them, each one like a blade cutting deeper. The betrayal hit harder than I ever imagined. These were the two people I should have been able to trust most. One was my wife, the partner I planned to build a family with. The other was her own brother, the man I welcomed into my home countless times. And together, they had carved a hole through my chest. I wanted to storm into the other room, throw the receipts at her, demand the truth, scream until the walls shook. My throat ached with the urge to confront her right then, but something inside me stopped. Instead of exploding, I went quiet. The anger didn't vanish. It sank deeper, cooling into something sharper. I realized yelling would give her power. If she cried, if she begged, I might break down and forgive her, and she would win. No, this wasn't the time to rage. This was the time to think, to wait, to plan. I gathered the papers, folded them neatly, and slipped them into my desk drawer. My breathing steadied as I made a silent promise to myself. They thought they were clever, sneaking behind my back, spinning lies to keep me blind. But I wasn't blind anymore. I had seen enough to know what was real. From that moment on, everything shifted. I didn't look at her the same when she smiled. I didn't hear her excuses the same when she said she was busy. I began to watch, to collect, to prepare. She had chosen deception. He had chosen betrayal. And I would choose something else entirely. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Revenge. I began keeping records, quietly and carefully. Every slip of paper I found went into a folder hidden in my desk. Every unusual phone call, every unexplained delay, every detail I could catch. I wrote it down with dates and times. At night, while she slept beside me, I replayed conversations in my head, jotting notes in a small notebook I kept tucked away under a pile of old bills. It became a ritual, a secret routine that gave me focus. During the day, I wore a mask. I laughed at her jokes, asked about her work, even kissed her goodbye like always. On the surface, nothing had changed. I made sure my face showed no anger, no suspicion. She needed to believe I was still the same husband, still in the dark. The more she thought I was blind, the easier it would be for me to gather what I needed. Mark was the only one who knew. We met at a bar one evening, and I slid the receipts across the table. He whistled low, shaking his head. "You've got enough to blow this up already," he said. But I shook my head. I didn't want a simple confrontation. I wanted something that would leave scars. "They want to sneak around," I told him. "They can have each other. But I'll make sure they can't trust each other when I'm done." Mark leaned back, studying me. "That's cold," he said, but I could see the respect in his eyes. He knew I wasn't thinking small. From then on, every action I took had a purpose. If Megan said she was heading out, I asked harmless questions and tucked the answers away in my memory. If Kyle dropped by, I forced a smile, offered him a beer, and studied his every move. I wasn't just looking for proof of what they were doing. I was watching for cracks between them, little signs of tension I could exploit later. At home, I placed small traps in conversation. Casual questions, offhand remarks, references to times or places they didn't know I already had written down. If her answer didn't match the record, I logged it. If Kyle flinched or grew nervous, I noted the exact words he stumbled over. Slowly, a web began forming, and I held the strings. There were moments when I caught Megan staring at me strangely, like she sensed something was off. I'd smile, squeeze her hand, and ask what she wanted for dinner. She never pressed further. Maybe she was too comfortable, too sure of herself. That was fine. The more she believed in her safety, the harder the fall would be. Each day that passed, my anger cooled into focus. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was an investigator, a strategist, waiting for the right time to strike. I told myself over and over, if they want each other, they can have each other. But it won't be the fairy tale they think. It will be ruin, and I'll be the one holding the match. I suggested a dinner at our place, calling it a chance to spend time together. Megan didn't hesitate to agree, and when I mentioned inviting Kyle and his girlfriend Rachel, she paused only for a second before nodding. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't ready for the two worlds to collide, which made me even more determined to make it happen. On the night of the dinner, I set the table, poured drinks, and acted like the perfect host. Rachel walked in cheerful, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Kyle, on the other hand, looked uneasy the moment he stepped through the door. His eyes flicked between me and Megan, his shoulders tight. We started with small talk. I asked Rachel about her job, and she lit up, chatting happily. Kyle barely touched his food, though. Megan tried to keep the conversation light, but her laughter sounded brittle. I waited, patient, letting them settle before I began to lace the evening with the threads I had prepared. I turned to Megan casually and said, "Remember that night you said you had a late meeting? Funny thing, I ended up near your office and didn't see any lights on." I let the words hang as I took a sip of my drink. Rachel glanced at her, confused. Megan forced a smile and said I must have mixed up the date. Her tone was sharp, but her eyes flickered nervously toward Kyle. Later, I mentioned another evening. "That time you swore you were stuck in traffic." I checked the freeway report. No accidents anywhere. I chuckled like it was a harmless story, but the air at the table shifted. Rachel's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Kyle cleared his throat and looked down at his plate. The tension from dinner hadn't eased. It clung to the air like smoke. I cleared my throat and set a folder on the table. No one moved at first. Megan's eyes darted to it, wide, her face draining of color. Kyle shifted in his chair, clearly recognizing the danger before a single page was turned. Rachel looked between us, confused but alert. I opened the folder and slid a receipt across the wood. "Funny how this dinner for 2 lines up perfectly with one of those overtime nights," I said evenly. Megan's lips parted, but no words came. Rachel leaned forward, reading the date and the location, her jaw tightening. Before Megan could speak, I placed another slip beside it. Then another. Different nights. Different restaurants. Same story every time. My tone stayed calm, but inside my chest my pulse hammered. Kyle tried to break the silence, chuckling nervously. "You're blowing this out of proportion. She's my sister. We had a couple of meals together, nothing more." His voice cracked on the last word, and Rachel snapped her head toward him. "Meals," she hissed. "Why didn't you ever mention them to me?" I didn't give him time to scramble for an answer. I leaned forward and quoted the exact words I'd overheard weeks ago, the ones that had shattered me. "I've always been in love with you. I can't stand seeing you with him." Megan let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling. Rachel's eyes widened, then filled with tears. She pushed her chair back sharply, the legs scraping against the floor. Kyle reached for her, but she shoved his hand away. "You told your sister you love her?" Her voice cracked under the weight of it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Megan finally spoke, her voice breaking. "I didn't ask for it, Rachel. I told him it was wrong." But the words rang hollow, her earlier silences and secret meetings drowning out her defense. Kyle raised his hands like he could calm the storm. "It's just feelings," he said quickly. "I never acted on them. It's harmless." "Harmless?" Rachel shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You've been sneaking around, lying to me, lying to him." She pointed at me, her face twisted with rage. "You've humiliated all of us." Megan sobbed harder, pleading, insisting it wasn't what it looked like. Kyle's voice rose, desperate, insisting I was twisting things, that I was exaggerating. The kitchen that had once held quiet meals and laughter turned into a war zone of shouting and accusations. Rachel shoved her chair back, so hard it toppled over. "I'm done," she cried, grabbing her purse. Kyle tried to follow, but she spun on him, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare come near me." The door slammed behind her, leaving the 3 of us in chaos. Megan collapsed against the table, shaking, while Kyle stood frozen, his face pale and jaw tight. I stayed seated, calm amid the wreckage, watching them unravel. I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth had already done the work for me. Everything I'd hidden, everything I'd gathered, lay in pieces before them, and there was no going back. Rachel turned her attention to him, narrowing her eyes. "You weren't with her, were you?" she asked, voice low but edged with suspicion. Kyle's face reddened. He shook his head quickly, muttering that it was ridiculous. Megan jumped in, insisting I was just trying to stir things up, that I was being dramatic. Her words tumbled too fast, as if she was desperate to fill the silence. But the damage was done. Rachel leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, studying the 2 of them like she was seeing them for the first time. Kyle avoided her gaze, fumbling with his napkin, while Megan tried to smile through clenched teeth. I kept my tone calm, almost amused, as if I didn't notice the tension growing across the table. But inside, I felt the satisfaction of a plan working. Every comment I dropped, every hint I exposed, made the cracks between them widen. By dessert, Rachel was quiet, her smile gone. Kyle snapped at her once when she pressed him with another question, and Megan's hands trembled as she carried plates back to the kitchen. None of them realized how carefully I had steered the evening, how each remark had been placed like a stone on a fragile bridge. The seeds were there now, planted deep. Rachel's doubts, Kyle's defensiveness, Megan's unease. They would keep growing long after the plates were cleared. and I would be ready to watch it all collapse. The house was silent the morning after the dinner. Megan sat at the table, eyes swollen from crying, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. I stood across from her, folder in hand, calm in a way I hadn't felt in months. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice flat. "No anger, no shouting, just final. You won't see a dime. I have everything I need to prove what you've done." Her head jerked up, eyes wide. "Ethan, please," her voice cracked. She reached for me, but I stepped back. The tears came fast, spilling down her face. It wasn't what it looked like. "You can't throw everything away over." I cut her off. "You threw it away. You and your brother. Don't stand there pretending I ruined this. You did." She broke then, collapsing against the chair, sobbing like her world was crumbling. Maybe it was. I felt nothing. The love I once had for her was gone, burned to ash. Word spread quickly through the family. Kyle tried to spin the story, painting himself as misunderstood, claiming his feelings had been harmless. But Rachel was gone, and she didn't keep quiet. She told everyone exactly what had happened at that table, her heartbreak fueling every word. Kyle's parents stopped answering his calls. Friends distanced themselves, whispering about him behind his back. His reputation rotted fast, and I didn't have to lift a finger. I watched it all play out with a strange sense of detachment. The two people who had stabbed me in the back were now turning on each other, drowning in the mess they'd created. Megan begged me daily, sometimes screaming, sometimes on her knees, promising she could fix things, swearing she still loved me. Each plea slid right off me. One evening, she clutched my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. "Don't do this, Ethan. We can get past it. Please, don't leave me like this." Her voice was desperate, raw. I looked her dead in the eyes and said nothing. The silence between us was louder than any words could have been. She finally let go, realizing the man who once adored her was gone, replaced with someone she no longer recognized. Kyle avoided me completely, too ashamed or too cowardly to face me. That was fine. His punishment was already unfolding without my help. Losing Rachel, losing respect, losing his standing in the family, that was enough. As for me, I moved through each day with a calm that surprised even myself. Revenge wasn't about shouting or fists. It was about patience, about letting the truth do the damage. And now, I stood on the other side, untouched, while they tore each other apart. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream. I simply watched as justice carried itself out. They had chosen lies, chosen betrayal. I chose control, and control had won. The papers were signed on a gray Tuesday morning. No shouting in the courtroom, no drawn-out argument, just signatures and silence. When it was done, the judge's gavel felt like the final nail sealing a coffin. Megan left the building with her head down, her attorney walking stiffly beside her. I didn't follow. There was nothing left to say. The house was mine. The walls, the furniture, the photographs that once carried memories of love and warmth now stood as reminders of what had been lost. But they were mine, and she had no claim to them anymore. She packed her belongings in boxes over a weekend, moving slowly, trying to start conversations that I refused to entertain. I stayed out of her way, giving her space, because every word she spoke sounded hollow. When the door finally shut behind her, the quiet that filled the house was heavy, but it was also clean. Kyle's fall had been just as sharp. Rachel never returned his calls, never gave him a chance to explain. She told anyone who asked exactly why she ended it, and soon his name became a stain. Family dinners no longer included him. His parents were polite in public but cold in private, and his friends drifted away. He became a man with no anchor, wandering in the shadow of choices he couldn't undo. I didn't need to chase him, didn't need to add fuel to his collapse. The betrayal he had chosen carried its own punishment. Losing Rachel was one blow, but losing the respect of his family was the one that truly gutted him. For once, I didn't feel anger when I thought about him, only pity mixed with satisfaction. At night, I sat alone in the living room, letting the silence settle. The pain was still there, raw and undeniable. Love doesn't vanish in an instant, and neither does heartbreak. But beneath the ache was something steady, vindication. Every step I had taken, every piece of proof I had gathered, every trap I had laid, it had all worked. I hadn't screamed or begged. I hadn't fought a losing battle. Instead, I had stayed patient, let the truth unravel them from the inside out, and now I was the one left standing. Sometimes I caught myself remembering the early days of my marriage, the way Megan used to laugh when we were young, the way I once looked at her with nothing but trust. Those memories hurt, but I let them pass. They belonged to another life, a life that had ended the night her brother confessed his twisted feeling. Now, as I closed the last box of her things and set it by the curb, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Freedom. Not joy, not triumph, just the calm certainty that I was no longer chained to lies. Betrayal had cut deep, but it had also cleared the path. Watching them destroy themselves wasn't just revenge, it was justice. And as I locked the door behind me, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't broken. I was free. Do you think I was right to walk away from both of them, or should I have tried forgiveness instead? Let me know your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories. I was free.